The Indo-Pacific region can be boiled down to two strategic visions. One is this is China's turf, and Beijing sets the rules. The other, the US is a prevailing Pacific power that one can bet on for the long haul. Right now, the US version is prevailing. On April 11, 2024, Biden held a historic leaders summit with Japan and the Philippines to unveil a series of agreements to strengthen security and economic ties. It takes aim at the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, and its bullying in the Indo-Pacific region and sends a strong signal to Beijing in an unprecedented way. The leaders of two key American allies in Asia met with the US president for the first time, highlighting a new trilateral alliance. Interestingly, it's the CCP that has made it happen. Beijing's bullying behavior has prompted its neighbors to seek American help and join hands. To its great surprise, Red China realized now that it's unwittingly found itself amid a multiple blockade. This network of blockades is so strong that it's likely to make it less prone to flaunt its power in the South China Sea and less bold in its attempt to start a war in the Taiwan Strait. One can sense the hidden panic in the response by this Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson.
我们注意到了有关情况，我愿做几点评论。
We noted this. I would like to make the following points. First, China strongly opposes the practice of bloc politics by relevant countries. We firmly oppose any acts that stoke and drive up tensions and harm other countries' strategic security and interests. We are seriously against forming exclusive groupings in this region. Japan and the Philippines have every right to develop normal relations with other countries, but they should not introduce bloc confrontation into this region, still less engage in trilateral cooperation at the expense of other countries' interests. To know whether the trilateral summit and cooperation is truly not aimed at China, the answer is right there in the trilateral statement. What else could it be if it's not a smear and attack against China?
Let's first look at the US-Japan summit. Japanese Prime Minister Kishida, at the invitation of US President Biden, came to the US on April 9th for a state visit. This was the first time since Prime Minister Abe's visit in 2015. On the evening of April 10th, Biden hosted a state dinner at the White House for Kishida and his wife, along with 200 guests. Given the special relationship between the two countries during World War II, this visit signaled a significant change in the world situation.
The alliance between Japan and the United States is the cornerstone of peace, security, prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. Ours is truly a global partnership. For that, Mr. Prime Minister Kishida, I thank you. Just a few generations ago, our two nations were blocked in a devastating conflict. It would have been easy to say, we remain adversaries. Instead, we made a far better choice. We became the closest of friends.
Japan and the United States are united than ever before. I believe that the Pacific Ocean has brought Japan and the United States together and so close because of the pioneering spirit of those who came before us and frontier spirit that we all have in common.
Kishida spoke in the U.S. Congress on April 11th. The speech received 48 rounds of applause from the audience.
The world needs the United States to continue playing this pivotal role in the affairs of nations. You believe that today I detect an undercurrent of self-doubt among some Americans about what your role in the world should be. This self-doubt is arising at the time when our world is at history's turning point. Turning to Japan's own neighborhood, China's current external stance and military actions present unprecedented and the greatest strategic challenge, not only to the peace and security of Japan, but to the peace and stability of international community at large. While such a challenge from China continues, our commitment to upholding a free and open international order based on the rule of law, as well as peace, will continue to be defining agenda going forward.
Kishida also said, although the world looks to your leadership, the US should not be expected to do it all unaided and on your own. I'm here to say that Japan is already standing shoulder to shoulder with the US. You are not alone. We are with you. This visit by Kishida resulted in the finalization of 70 defense cooperation agreements. For the first time ever, the US changed the command structure of US forces in Japan and established the US-Japan Joint Command Center.
Together, our countries are taking significant steps to strengthen defense security cooperation. We're modernizing command and control structures, and we're increasing the interoperability and planning of our militaries so they can work together in a seamless and effective way. This is the most significant upgrade in our alliance since it was first established. I'm also pleased to announce that for the first time, Japan and the United States and Australia will create a network system of air, missile, and defense architecture. We're also looking forward to standing up a trilateral military exercise with Japan and the United Kingdom. And our AUKUS defense partnership with Australia and the United Kingdom is exploring how Japan can join our work in the second pillar, which focuses on advanced capabilities, including AI, autonomous systems. All told, that represents a new benchmark for our military cooperation across a range of capabilities.
Military upgrades also include networked air defense capabilities, joint development and production of ballistic missiles, maintenance of U.S. aircraft and ships in Japan, joint fighter pilot training working groups, and more. Why these adjustments? Our observation is that once Beijing attacks Taiwan, the Indo-Pacific Command, currently located in Hawaii, might not have time to respond due to time differences, so the command authority of the U.S. military in Japan is increased. Correspondingly, including intelligence sharing, weapons production, warship and fighter aircraft maintenance, and research and development, one can easily see that this plan has only one imaginary enemy, the Chinese Communist Party.
The Prime Minister of Japan.
In addition to military affairs, the US and Japan will also strengthen cooperation in artificial intelligence, space cooperation, and establish joint partnerships to accelerate the development and commercialization of nuclear fusion, etc. It can be said that this all-round cooperation of common advancement and retreat means that the two Pacific Rim powers will significantly strengthen cooperation in military, high-tech, space, etc., and work with NATO partners to jointly prevent and contain the world's largest red regime. Let's look at the summit between the US, Japan, and the Philippines. The past year has seen historic levels of cooperation between the US and the Philippines and the South China Sea, including complex multilateral maritime cooperation activities between Australia, Japan, the Philippines, and the US. At this summit, the US has shown a more clear and tough attitude towards the CCP's bullying behavior in the South China Sea.
Today, we mark a historic moment, the first ever leaders summit between the United States, Japan, and the Philippines. And it's truly an honor to have you both here as we begin this new era of a partnership. And today, we commit to writing that story in the future together, to building the Indo-Pacific that is free, open, prosperous, and secure for all. This is something I know you've discussed with Vice President Harris during her travel to the Indo-Pacific. And I want to be clear, The United States defense commitments to Japan and to the Philippines are ironclad. They're ironclad. As I've said before, any attack on Philippine aircraft, vessels, or armed forces in the South China Sea would invoke our Mutual Defense Treaty.
The Chinese media reaction to this is that the Philippines is on a dangerous path and that its destructive power shouldn't be underestimated, among other alarming headlines. This, in fact, reflects a sense of panic. On April 12th, the director of the Asian Department of the Chinese Foreign Ministry met with the Japanese Embassy Chief Minister to protest against Kishida's remarks. The same official also met with the Philippine ambassador to China to protest the so-called negative remarks and behaviors related to China made by the Philippine side during the US-Japan-Philippines summit. The CCP may not be willing to face up to the fact that all these are instigated by itself. At present, both the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait are subject to strong provocations and threats from China. In the Taiwan Strait, PLA military planes and warships are constantly harassing Taiwan. In the South China Sea, China and the Philippines have clashed over the ship supply at 2nd Thomas Shoal. The situation in the South China Sea is on the verge of flaring up, driven by provocations by the CCP. The South China Sea waterways are vital to global trade, accounting for half of the world's annual merchant shipping tonnage and 1/3 of the world's maritime traffic passes. China maintains its claim to sovereignty in these choke points. It bases its maritime claims on the 9-dash line, which extends its sovereignty over a large area of the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ, which includes resource-rich fishing grounds and potentially huge reserves of oil and gas. International law stipulates that the EEZ extends up to 370 kilometers beyond a country's territorial waters and gives it jurisdiction over all natural resources. But China has blocked all attempts by the Philippines to exploit these reserves. We reported on this 2 weeks ago. Philippine President Marcos Jr. has vowed not to succumb to the CCP intimidation. He visited China in January 2024 and received a promise of $22.8 billion in investment. But it seems that Marcos isn't so convinced by the capital promises from China, and that between China and the US, he's firmly committed to staying close to the US.
China will continue whatever investments they choose to make. This is separate from any proposed or potential Chinese investments in the Philippines. How do I see how it will affect? I don't see that it will affect one way or the other. The trilateral agreement is not something that is only out of convenience or because there is a new situation. I really view it as a continuing evolution of our relationship with both countries, with the U.S. and Japan. And I think the trilateral agreement is extremely important. It is going to change the dynamic that we have been seeing in the region, in ASEAN, in Asia, around the South China Sea, and I think certainly for the better.
The U.S., working hand-in-hand with Japan and the Philippines, has been beefing up their militaries. At the U.S.-Japan-Philippines summit, Biden re-emphasized that any attack on Philippine ships, aircraft, and armed forces in the South China Sea would trigger the Mutual Defense Treaty between the U.S. and the Philippines. On April 12th, the Philippine Secretary of Foreign Affairs spoke at the U.S. State Department, accusing China of escalating harassment against the Philippines. The U.S. Secretary of Defense and the U.S. stood with the Philippines against coercion by the CCP.
An armed attack on Philippine armed forces, public vessels, or aircraft in the Pacific, including the South China Sea, would invoke U.S. defense commitments under our Mutual Defense Treaty. Both of our countries have invested significant time and resources to address our shared security challenges, and we're going to keep building our partnership.
When it comes to the Senkaku Islands, which China calls the Diaoyu Islands, the U.S. has also repeatedly reiterated that they are governed by the U.S.-Japan Mutual Defense Treaty because Beijing has been consistently dispatching maritime police vessels around the Japanese-controlled islands. Leaders from all three countries hailed the summit. Marcos Jr. said this U.S.-Japan-Philippine alliance isn't a temporary measure but a natural result of the deepening relationship between the three countries. He said, "This meeting could be just the beginning." Kishida described the three countries as natural partners in the Pacific Ocean. Three state heads have all indicated that more meetings will be held in the coming years. We observed that the Philippines can't fight the CCP on its own. However, the U.S. and the Philippines on their own aren't enough. South Korea could surely join, but Japan is the most suitable country. On April 7th, prior to the summit, the US, Australia, the Philippines, and Japan held exercises. US National Security Advisor Sullivan said that there will be more of these new forms of joint exercises in the future. According to a statement released by the White House on the evening of April 11th, after reviewing the trilateral Coast Guard exercises that have already taken place, the three leaders agreed to intensify their military exercises, including a plan to allow members of the Philippine and Japanese Coast Guards to patrol on a U.S. Coast Guard vessel in the Indo-Pacific region, to further train and synchronize our efforts. In other words, the three countries are planning to normalize such drills. From the first joint military exercise of the four countries in the South China Sea and the subsequent summit of the three state heads, the contours of the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy can be seen, namely to create an integrated deterrent system. In addition to the U.S.-Philippine alliance, there are also the Philippine-Japanese, Philippine-Japanese-Australian, and U.S. Philippine-Japanese-Australian alliances, ranging from bilateral, trilateral, to quadrilateral military cooperation. It's a complex alliance. This complex network is only for the defense of a dangerous regime. Last summer, the US, Japan, and South Korea reached a security agreement committing them to consultation on the security threats they face, cooperation on ballistic missile defense, and annual joint military exercises, creating a more solid trilateral alliance to counter threats from Beijing. Japan and the Philippines are about to sign a Reciprocal Access Agreement (RAA) in 2024 and will facilitate troop visits and joint military training. In 2022, Japan has signed RAAs with the UK and Australia. After Vietnam and the US upgraded their relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2023, Japan and Vietnam upgraded their relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership dedicated to peace and prosperity in Asia and the world in November 2023 and has been holding regular defense policy dialogues. It can be said that the US possesses a strategic advantage that the CCP can hardly match. That is, the number of allies. The US is implementing an integrated deterrent strategy which constantly emphasizes the need to fully utilize the advantage of US allies and partners to counter the CCP's regional and global ambitions. Therefore, the US has adopted multilateral and multi-level alliances such as the Trilateral AUKUS quadrilateral talks and the Five Eyes Alliance. The US also hopes that beyond the multilateral approach there will be layers upon layers of defense against the Chinese threat. In this way, Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia will be connected, and South Korea will soon join in, forming a blockade in the Western Pacific. AUKUS defense is also being upgraded. In addition to assisting Australia in upgrading its diesel-powered submarines to nuclear-powered submarines as the first pillar, AUKUS is also actively inviting Japan to join the second pillar. It'll include the research and development of artificial intelligence, undersea capabilities, and ultra-high-speed weapons. The current AUKUS has the effect of a second island chain. The first and second island chains have formed a three-dimensional defense posture, forming a grid-like defense alliance that is clearly targeting the ambitions of Beijing's regime. Although the US has tried not to agitate the CCP in the open, it's clear that the CCP has been angered.
美英澳都不是南海问题的直接当事方。
The United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia are not direct parties to the South China Sea issue and should not make efforts to resolve disputes through negotiation and consultation with the parties concerned. The recent tensions in the South China Sea and the intensification of regional confrontation are inseparable from the U.S. efforts to woo its allies. China is not the creator of or a party involved in the Ukraine crisis and has played and will continue to play a constructive role in the political settlement of the issue. China urges the U.S. to reflect on itself, stop adding fuel to the fire, and stop attacking and smearing the normal relationship between China and Russia. Stop shifting blame to China. China is a builder of world peace, a contributor to global development, and a defender of the international order. When it comes to peace and security, China has the best track record as a major country. The international community has long been public about this, and the U.S. is not in a position to judge China.
国际社会对此早有公论，美方没有资格对中国品头论足。
The net-like blockade is not only safeguarding peace in the South China Sea, but also inhibiting the CCP's impulse to attack Taiwan. For example, the US-Japan summit has adjusted the chain of command of US forces in Japan to strengthen the US-Japan collaborative operational capability, so that if a war breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, counterattacks can be made in the shortest possible time. Dictators or dictatorships are highly unpredictable because their power is unchecked. The CCP leaders' internal and external problems may lead to irrational decisions and judgments. Accordingly, a new trend has been formed in the world, where many countries with the same values have joined together to warn the CCP not to act rashly and invade democratic countries. Whenever a democratic country is invaded, other democratic allies will rise up to counteract it, and this will create a deterrent effect. Of course, the US and its allies are not only cooperating militarily, but also joining hands in geopolitics, science and technology, and the economy in a multifaceted manner. Apart from deepening the strategic blockade of the CCP in the Indo-Pacific region through the first and second island chains, the economic blockade is also global in nature. We will discuss the economic blockade in future episodes. In such a politico-economic double-barreled situation, Beijing will become more isolated. It's likely to step up its cooperation with totalitarian regimes like North Korea, Russia, and Iran, except that none of these countries are performing as well as expected economically. Plus, the CCP has lost confidence within itself, and domestic demand has plummeted. How long the CCP can last should be a predictable figure.